Hi, I'm Annie Botticelli, and welcome to my Jupiter in Capricorn report for all signs. The things I'm going to talk about today will be true for each and every one of you. As an outer planet, meaning one of the planets that are further from us, make a transit through the sky, it has global effects, and those global effects filter down to all of us. So that's what the subject of this discussion is going to be, so I can help you be prepared for the things that may come and also help you to best use the energy so that you can make the most of it. We only get Jupiter in Capricorn for 1 year every 12 years. And although, like with every transit, there are challenges that can come from it, there are also opportunities that can come from it that you'll really want to capitalize on while it's happening. To best understand how the energies of a transit can manifest, it's helpful to look back at other times in history when that planet was moving through that sign. So, for instance, the last time that we had Jupiter in Capricorn was from December 2007 through January of 2009. So if you think back to that period of time for yourself, for the world, the kinds of things that happen then are not necessarily the exact ways that that energy is going to manifest. Like, for instance, there might not be a huge banking crisis, there might not be a huge real estate crisis, but are there going to be market corrections? Likely. Are there going to be shifts and tests to the foundations of systems? Yes, I'm sure. And that's what this transit is all about. The energy of Jupiter is very different than the energy of Saturn and Capricorn. Saturn is the ruler of Capricorn, Jupiter is the ruler of Sagittarius. To understand how energies mix together like this, it always makes me remember my days in college, when one of my many majors, being a Sag, I had several majors before I was finished, and one of them I was pre-med. So basically I was going to go to pharmacy school, and I had all the same classes that you'd have going to medical school. And so I was in labs a lot, and I was, had the goggles and everything, and would be mixing things together to see what would happen. And it's very similar, that I always think about that when I think about astrology and when I try to explain how things may occur. It's like understanding the property of one thing, understanding the property of something else, and then understanding what happens when you mix those properties together. So to better understand what is going to come this year, we have to understand the energy of Jupiter, and we have to understand the energy of Capricorn, and then see what that looks like when you mix them together. So that's what I'm going to be showing you. The energy of Jupiter is all about expansion and growth and opportunities and benevolence and luck and amplification. So many of you, as we've just gone through this last year of Jupiter in its own sign of Sagittarius, every planet rules a sign, and the sign that Jupiter rules is Sag. So the energies of Sagittarius and Jupiter have similarities. So, there's been a lot of excess from this transit, because when something is in its own sign, it's driven to do more of whatever that is. And Jupiter is an amplifier. So for many of you, you might have seen, instead of some typical benevolence from Jupiter, you might have seen an amplification of problems. And this is a common outcome of any Jupiter transit, because what Jupiter is seeking to do is expand. And in order to expand, it has to test the foundation. So if you've built something on a house of cards, like the banking, like the subprime market was built, when it fell, people getting loans that shouldn't have gotten loans, and having these short-term loans that were going to balloon out, really the only inevitable consequence was going to be the people weren't going to be able to afford the mortgages once those balloons ended. And that's, part of what happened. So if you build something on a house, with a house of cards, the slightest wind is going to blow that house down. And that's what happened in that period of time. So anything that's built on a shaky foundation could come down with Jupiter in Capricorn. But anything that, like if you learned from last time and you spent the last 12 years building a foundation, building a solid ground, building, anew after things had been wiped away from that time, learning the lessons, that's where the Saturn comes in. Saturn is the ruler of Capricorn. So we're mixing Saturnian and Jupiterian energies here. So Saturn is the taskmaster. It wants hard work. It wants discipline. It wants realism. So you have to apply this like discipline, taskmaster, hard work, reality check, feasibility check of Saturn combined with the Jupiter energies. So anything that you've done in the last year or the last 12 years may be tested, and you'll have to see, you might have even seen, and this is typical, like when we're about to have a Jupiter move into a different sign, about 3 or so months before it gets there. So in this case, it was November, like September, you might have noticed this kind of brewing and getting stronger towards the end of 2019. You might have noticed some of the themes for Jupiter and Capricorn coming in. So you might have seen yourself streamlining, trimming the fat, reining in some of the excess, getting back on track, making a plan to pay off debt. That's what this year is going to be all about, and you might have had a little introduction to it towards the end of the year, because it's the combining of those energies. Streamlining efforts, seeing where you can work less but be more efficient, everything like that. And seeing if the things that you've expanded into are feasible for the long term. And if they're not easy or sustainable, that's another big key word for Capricorn, is sustainability. If it's not sustainable, then you may choose to end it or divert it or shift it into something else, so that it doesn't fall down, under continued pressure. So that's what a lot of this energy has to do with. And, back to this kind of chemistry analogy. At the time that I was in the labs, I hadn't had my spiritual awakening where I started to understand how much more there is beyond the things that we see. But now I understand chemistry and the relationship to alchemy, and that's how the approach that I use for astrology, which is we have certain ingredients, and some of those ingredients aren't creating gold or aren't, creating a product that is something that we want. Maybe they're creating lead, or that's what we had started with. But you can use the combination of these properties to create alchemy. So you can transform from something difficult, something very wonderful. And sometimes it takes the pressure of a challenged aspect or a challenged situation or an amplification of a problem in order to get to where it is you're supposed to be going. Okay, so I want to give you an example. I'm going to go through a series of explanations of how the energies will combine, like some ideas that I've had about what this is going to look like. But first I'm going to talk about something. I was reading this article in the Wall Street Journal, and it was about Dominion Energy. Okay, it's a company who just made a pact with the Dairy Farmers of America, and also in conjunction with Vanguard Renewables, to harness methane gas from the breakdown of cow poop into usable energy. And this is like, oh my gosh, it's really exciting. But I'm going to explain to you why understanding what they're doing here is the perfect story, analogy to take with you throughout this year, because it's exactly this. When I read it, this is happening to me every day, all day. I'm like, oh, wow. So that's, I read something or see something in life and I'm like, that's this transit or this aspect manifesting. That's the essence of that in this practical, mundane reality. So this example of what they're doing, right? So we've had this huge problem with all of the, the methane gas produced by the cows, and people are eating more cows and using more cow products. So there's more and more cows and they're making more of this methane gas, and it's, affecting global warming. So we're contributing to global warming, or so many people believe. And they didn't have a solution except to tell people to eat less meat, which if they did that, then that could work as well. But you know how people are. They're going to do what they want to do, and that's not necessarily a realistic way to solve the problem. But then you bring Jupiter in Capricorn. Okay, it wants practical realism, and then you mix the ideals of Sagittarius. Jupiter and Sagittarius are all about idealism, like an ideal outcome, a solution, a positive way of looking at something. And then the taskmaster, Saturn, wants to say, well, how does it look on the books? What are the outcomes? Is it productive? Is it efficient? So this whole thing that these companies are doing, that's what it's doing. So it's taking something that was a huge problem. It was also a wasted use of energy. This cow poop that's degrading, when it's getting broken down, it's forming this gas. And that is energy that's going in. And not only is it wasted, we're not using it, but it's working against us. So now they have these fairly easy ways to trap and facilitate the breakdown and channel it into this usable substance. It's going to help the farmers. It's going to help the climate. It's going to help, anyone who has stock in those companies. So maybe that's a little, slip of a stock tip for you guys to look at if you want to. I'm not a licensed person in that field, but I've been working in that field for 35 years since I was a little kid. Anyway, that's another story, but it's going to benefit everybody, from this. So this is the type of spirit to bring with you in this time. How can you create solutions? How can you create things that actually work? How can you blend idealism with realism for productive outcomes? Okay, so now I have a series of things that I'm going to explain to understand better these the combinations of these energies. Okay, so Jupiter is known to be benevolent, but it also can amplify things. I talked about that before. If there's a problem and it's under the surface, Jupiter will come, make it worse, make it loud, make it dramatic, so that you see, oh, that's a problem, I have to fix that. And so really, if you think about it that way, having Jupiter in Capricorn, even though technically astrologers will say Jupiter is in fall in Capricorn, meaning it's not good. That's what, like, a standard description of Jupiter in Capricorn. It's not good. But I don't take things for at that limited superficial face value, because I'm an optimist. And even though, yes, when hard things may come, I'll tell you, and what kind of challenges may come, I'll tell you. But my focus is how we can make this good. How can we can create alchemy? So even though something is technically in fall, meaning kind of the energies work against each other, which is like I've already described to you, that doesn't mean that you can't put them together to make something good. And I see this story at play every day in my life because I have a ton of Sag energy in my chart and I have a ton of Capricorn energy. So it's because of my Cap energy that I can do something with all the ideas that I have with Sag. It's because of the Capricorn energy that I can be consistent. And you guys who have been watching me for a long time, I show up every month, no matter what is going on in my life, as I have for over 7 years. And I'm there with you. I'm showing up, not a typical Sag trait, right? But it is Capricorn trait. So this type of energy of just blending, firming, solidifying, crystallizing into form an idea. That's another way I've seen this manifest. Okay, so I just want to check out my notes because I get off track. Okay, so something else that I have seen this do could be to bring wisdom from the past and resources of the present and the future. So like the traditional energies of Capricorn. Capricorn is all about tradition, about what worked before, about what our ancestors did. It's one of the 7 generations signs, which looks at how are things going to affect 7 generations from now with things that we do today. It's like a very forward-thinking sign, but it also looks to the past for wisdom and the traditions that have kept everything, going and kept the structure for things. So I see the energy of elders or people who have figured things out, either from like ancient wisdom or wisdom in recent, years, coming together and banding together and forming, groups where they're making tangible efforts to educate with the idealistic outcomes how they did it in traditional ways. Okay, so reining in excess and regulated growth is something else that we talked about. So when you have Jupiter in Sagittarius, like we just had, things can spiral out of control. Debt can spiral out of control. Addictions, everything can spiral out of control because it's an excessive energy. But if you pull into something that's more easy to manage, then you can have sustained growth instead of runaway growth that could create problems. Okay, so on the personal level, some of this reining in of excess is going to come from internal. Like you'll get that message like, I have to shift my diet. I have to stop drinking or so much, or, I have to, whatever. So like that reining in or that need for structure or discipline could come from the inside. Like you feel inspired. You're just like, okay, I feel this. It's time for this. But sometimes when we don't get the message, and there often are messages coming, signs from the outside saying, hey, you better slow it down or you better get it together. Sometimes it has to come from outside. So it has to be a crisis. It has to be a health crisis. It has to be an incident, or something happens to someone that wakes you up. So these implications for balancing excess and getting into a system, a regimen, a routine, something that can work as a practice is part of what's going to come in. This can also come in from the perspective of like budgeting, and not just money, but again with resources. We talked about how Capricorn is related to sustainability, and sustainability is, can be environmental, can be financial, can be, however you want to look at it. Is whatever you're doing now going to be able to be maintained for the long term? This is a huge question that is going to be coming to you this year in a big way. Again, either you're going to be inspired from the inside or something's going to happen from the outside. Okay, so there are going to be a lot of global implications, and that can have to do with governments, that can have to do with, companies. But basically the leadership is going to be looking to trim fat, right? So any way that you can streamline affairs, cut out things that are unproductive. There's going to be a lot of merging of companies, a lot of downsizing of companies in an effort to streamline affairs. So budgets, cutting off waste, other motions to focus, resources on priorities, things like that will be in the forefront. And there may also be more strict rules or laws that are coming in. And again, this can happen on any level, but, things like with Airbnb. I don't have any judgment or anything to say on either side of arguments of things with Airbnb. I'm here as a scientific observer, seeing how these astrological lessons and manifestations are coming in real world things. So in one of the places that I live, there was a huge issue with Airbnb because it had taken over the town. People who lived there couldn't find places to rent. They had to close a school because the teachers couldn't find affordable places to live. I mean, it was a huge problem. And part of the energy of this Jupiter and Capricorn coming in towards the end of the year, which is now getting solidified, is the reining in of this just open use of the Airbnb, where there's more restrictions on owner-occupied. There's like regulations coming about how these things that have kind of just expanded in a huge way, but then created these other problems, how they're going to be managed. So you'll see a lot of that trend. There's going to be a drive for practical education and resourcefulness. Okay, so this combination of Saturnian and Jupiterian forces will bring like this idea of practical education. So education programs that at the end of it, you have a skill, you can do something with it. Also affordable education that you don't have to be in debt at the end of the education. So things that are focused on creating sustainability in education and creating sustainability for the acquisition of skills to be utilized in the workforce are going to be things that come up in a huge way. And again, everything that I talk about, like in this global way, comes in the individual way as well. So you may be asking yourself, okay, I have this degree. What am I doing with it? Can I do something with it? Is there something I can do with it that I can enjoy? Can I convert this degree in this certain thing that I'm not interested in into success in some other way? So looking to use the things that you already have, maybe switched around a little bit to turn it into something else, and any efforts that you put forth in the present and the future to have an outcome or a goal in mind for what you're going to do with it so that you streamline your efforts. Okay, something else that's going to come out a lot is, or come up a lot, is well-thought plans versus impulsive action. Jupiter and the energy of Sagittarius can be very impulsive. It can be very flowy, where, I'm feeling this now, so I'm going to do it, where it's not very well thought out. And sometimes that works. I know for myself, having a bunch of Sag, I often will go with the flow, follow the synchronicity, and everything will be perfect. If I don't get off track, I just follow the signs. And that is very apropos in certain situations. But what's going to come up with Jupiter and Capricorn has to do with getting a better plan together, getting a contingency plan together. You know, we also have, in the year of 2020, I'm expecting for this video to stand for all of the next Jupiter in Capricorns as well, but I'm going to make some brief mentions here in the time of recording. But you know, we've got a lot of retrogrades this year as well, and those are going to bring up a lot of questions and reconsidering. And Jupiter in Capricorn is going to help those questions to be geared towards strategy. How are you going to strategize to get the outcomes that you want? A huge piece that's going to come up is freedom versus responsibility. Freedom is the Sag thing. You know, responsibility is the Capricorn thing. So when you combine these questions about freedom on a global level, on a country level, on an individual level, all of the in a relationship, all of these questions about what is freedom. Do you have too much freedom? Do you need more discipline and focus? You know, do you have too much responsibility? Do you need a break? Like finding this balance between freedom and responsibility, redefining what responsibility is or what freedom is. That's going to be a big piece. Things like focusing on fewer projects, reining in, like I talked about before, you know, so just kind of like this whole theme of finding, testing, creating, holding of healthy boundaries is going to be huge. This has been going on and this is going to continue going on. So, you know, this issue of boundaries in the individual, personal, interpersonal, you know, country, intra-country, inter-country, government, you know, world experience, the energy of boundaries, the question of boundaries, the question of freedom, and trying to define that and get systems for it are going to be a big theme. And you will find in your individual experience that you are asking these questions, or Spirit is forcing it into your experience that you have to ask those questions and come up with some different plans. Or maybe it will prove that some of the things you're doing are right and you'll have your confirmation, you can move forward. This time is also going to be about creating legacies. Okay, so again, like taking these ideas and ideals and creating things that can be used for time beyond now. So you'll see that involved, you know, again, at the global level down to the individual level. Something really key about Jupiter and Capricorn has to do with commitment to a vision rather than just talking about it, doing it. Because the energy of Sagittarius and Jupiter can talk about a lot of things, but the actual doing it and following through with it is the the Jupiter in Capricorn piece. Because the follow through, the commitment, the hard work, the plan, that is something that can be added by this Capricorn energy that Jupiter doesn't have on its own. So again, even though astrologers will say Jupiter is in fall in Capricorn and use examples like the breakdown of the housing market and how that messed everybody up as an example of how terrible it is. Yes, it's true that those things happen, but I explained to you why. It was built on a house of cards. Anything that's built on those things, on fragile foundations, are going to come down when the test is applied. But, you know, it depends on how you look at it, right? So if those things weren't sustainable, they were going to end eventually anyway. And that's the bottom line. And that's what this is teaching, is to build sustainably. There are also many people, myself included, even though I was part of the subprime, the whole thing, and I had a really, really, really difficult life-changing situation that came from that for me. At that same period of time, I had multiple things in multiple areas of my life that made that time actually one of the best times in my life as this other terrible thing was going on. Because Jupiter in Capricorn can crystallize dreams, things you've always wanted. Your biggest ideal, want this to happen, can crystallize it actually into a form where you're now experiencing it. So that's the other side of what can happen at this time. And that is going to happen for many people. And the more you apply these ideas of hard work, persistence, consistency, realism, mixed with the idealism and strategy, the more you're going to be able to gel things. So Jupiter in Capricorn is very much about crystallizing dreams into form. Something else that I see as a blending of these energies has to do with logic and intuition blending together rather than either or. When people start to wake up spiritually and start to follow their intuition, they have this battle with the ego and the logical part of themselves, saying intuition is the way, logic is not the way. And then after they go deep enough into the intuitive parts, they come to realize that both are the way. It's just establishing the discernment of when to use which. The combining of logic and intuition is one of the ideal outcomes of this Jupiter in Capricorn, which I'm really excited about. So even people who do not like metaphysical mumbo jumbo will often admit that they have a gut feeling about something. They feel it in their gut. They have a hunch. That word they use, gut and hunch, that's intuition. They're not using the word intuition because it sounds like they don't resonate with it, but that's exactly what it is. Business people that I know, myself included, will attest to, if I would have trusted my gut on that business deal, I wouldn't have gotten in this trouble, or I would have gone this other way. So this idea of blending logic and intuition, having a strategy, having a backup plan, but going with your gut, even if it doesn't seem like everything is lined up. This combination is something that can be developed, whether you're intending to or not, this year. And if you're purposely doing it, it can go further. I love this meditation that Gregg Braden, I love Gregg Braden. He is so amazing. Look him up. He's Gregg, G-R-E-G-G, Braden, B-R-A-D-E-N. He's a scientist that shows us the missing links between things we thought we knew and how science is catching up with spirituality. Things that people have known, for many thousands of years, science is catching up with some spiritual understandings and principles. And he shows those things. But in any case, he talks about this meditation, and I have a blog about this on my website called cozybysweetstarlight.com. It's under Spirit Fuel, or if you just search for three steps, it should come up. So basically these 3 steps to blend your intuition and your logic are to put your hand in the prayer mudra, put it down towards your heart. I can't do it now, I'll mess with the microphone. And to breathe slowly and to think about things you're grateful for. When you combine those things, your brain waves move into harmonic blending of intuition and logic, and your heart field and your mind field basically find coherence. And he's showing this in his labs now. Studies or people he's affiliated with are showing that this heart field, this mind field, the heart field is bigger than the mind fields. This is a surprise to many people, but the combination of them, this logic and intuition, is where most of that's the key. Is basically you want to combine the heart and the mind. And those 3 simple steps, and he says just do it for 3 minutes. If you can do it for 3 minutes, breathing slowly with your heart mudra, prayer mudra by your heart, and thinking about things you're grateful for, then the combination of those put you in this harmonic coherence where your brain and your heart are talking to each other. And that's when you can get the best of both worlds, and that is the goal for this year. A couple of other pieces here, good fortune and blessings coming from business. Okay, so putting yourself out in the world in a bigger way, taking a leap, making yourself visible. A lot of good fortune and fulfillment can come from that. And that's a combination of those energies. Also, the energy of setting and evaluating reasons for goals. Okay, so Jupiter is very much about the bigger picture. And Saturn and Capricorn are very much about goal-oriented things that can get very narrow, even if they're talking about a bigger goal. So evaluating, do you need to set more goals? Do you need to set less goals? Does your to-do list need to be bigger? Does your to-do list need to be smaller? Do you have too much responsibility? Do you need more responsibility? Are you too focused on the big picture? Are you focused on the small details and missing the big picture? Like balancing these things, and plus your reason for accomplishing something. This year is an amazing opportunity with Jupiter and Capricorn to start to do things for different reasons. Many people will do things to correct things that happened in their childhood, so they weren't acknowledged, or people dismissed them and undervalued them, and they say, okay, well, I'm going to show them I'm going to get this degree, or I'm going to reach this outcome, and then everyone's going to approve of me. I'm going to show them. And sometimes you have a momentary feeling of peace and fulfillment when you reach that goal. But if you're seeking something like that purely to make someone else wrong or to get recognition, then it's like this hamster wheel. So the evaluation of why you're doing something and the raw honesty with why you're doing something and the resetting of goals and the shifting, doing inner work to kind of like do things for a higher reason rather than just trying to prove something can be part of this. So these are the things that are most on my mind for Jupiter and Capricorn. You can look at my many other resources that I have on my YouTube channel, AnnieHelpsYouTV.com. You can search for Annie Botticelli on the internet and you'll see all of my resources. You can go to AnnieHelpsYou.com for my very detailed astrology blog. You can also sign up for my free email newsletter and get a written general transit write-up with the dates and the transits and what you can expect from them a month early in your inbox. You can watch my monthly horoscopes for each sign. You can go to CozyBySweetStarlight.com to see my written horoscopes, plus all kinds of other healthy lifestyle blogs blending astrology into your life. You can also check out my new school, Luminous Life Multiversity. You can go to LUMLife, L-U-M-E, life.com to see all of my courses. I have my courses up there now, but I'm going to have new teachers coming in. And when you're an enrollee in my school, you will receive all of the free courses. You'll have access to any free courses that we put up there, and there are going to be many more of those over time. So I hope you have a wonderful month. I hope you have a wonderful year. I hope you have a wonderful Jupiter and Capricorn experience, and that you can, re-listen to this and put the principles into practice and just make the most of this awesome opportunity. Bye.